Welcome to Basic Brewing Radio for Thursday, October 10th, 2013. I'm James Spencer. Here at Basic Brewing Radio, we're all about home brewing. This week, homebrewer Ethan Tripp shares results from his whiskey barrel sour brown Solera project. Andy Sparks and I taste beers that represent 2.5 years of aging and souring on wood. If you're new to home brewing and would like to get into the hobby for the first time, check out our website, basicbrewing.com, where you can find archives of our audio and video podcasts and our DVDs to walk you through basic and more advanced brewing techniques. You can follow me on Twitter. I'm Basic Brewing, all one word. Also, you can find me on Facebook at facebook.com/basicbrewing.james. We have a show page on Facebook at facebook.com/basicbrewing. We are on Google Plus, too. And thanks again to everybody clicking on the Amazon.com associate link on our basicbrewing.com site. You know how that works. Apparently, you're using it a bunch. Whenever you think of Amazon shopping, go to our website first, basicbrewing.com. Click on our Amazon ad. That will take you to Amazon, and then you can shop as you normally do and support the show at the same time. It won't cost you any extra, and that's the beauty of the whole thing. We greatly appreciate your support. We also have associate links that work in a similar fashion for Brew Your Own magazine and the American Homebrewers Association on our site, too. You can find our Basic Brewing iPhone app on iTunes and our Android app on Amazon.com. We're on the BlackBerry podcast directory, and we're on the Stitcher app as well. We're on the Windows Phone directory, too. Check out our brewer's logbook at basicbrewingshop.com. In the front is a blank calendar that you can use to track your fermentations and plan your brews. And there is room in the back of the book to log the details of up to 50 batches of beer. If you want to put a tip in our tip jar, some coinage in our guitar case, you can go to basicbrewing.com/support. Thanks to everybody who has done so already. Protect your precious beer with one of our growler bags. Check those out at basicbrewingshop.com. I've actually got some time to read some letters this week. Let's take a look into the mailbag to answer a question from way back on the September 19th episode from a listener, David, about extract pumpkin beers. If you'll remember, I said you probably should put your pumpkin in the mash instead of simply adding it to the boil. And here's what some of you responded. Nate said, for several years I've been brewing a pumpkin ale recipe using canned pumpkin, pure pumpkin, not pie filling, in the boil. I recently posted an article on my blog, thehomebrewnerd.com, with my recipe. While it's not a porter recipe and not an extract recipe, it does share how I use the pumpkin and spice, which is to add the canned pumpkin to the kettle at the start of the boil and the spice at the end. Year in and year out, the pumpkin beer I make with this recipe is always a hit with my family and friends, and I've made this beer more than any other in the 6 years I've been homebrewing. I do think the pumpkin changes the mouthfeel of the beer without it being starchy. In my opinion, don't be afraid to add pumpkin directly to the boil. Thanks, Nate. Listener Matthew from Michigan writes, in response to the question asked last week about making pumpkin beer and using pumpkin, I make my pumpkin ale with pumpkin puree purchased at any grocery. It is 100% pure pumpkin with no additives. I put this right into my mash, as is, and add some rice hulls, as the pumpkin can make things very sticky. I also add 20 grams of pre-mixed pumpkin spice at flameout. Thanks, Matthew. Don from around Statesboro, Georgia, writes, our local club, Blind Willie Brewers, did a public brew at the local farmer's market of a pumpkin beer. We bought a pumpkin from a local farmer that day, cut it into chunks, removed the rind, and placed it in a muslin bag. We brewed an extract for convenience at the market and added the pumpkin at the boil with the first hop addition. 50 minutes later, we removed the bag and found nothing left inside. Last hops added and finings, then chilled. The pumpkin did leave a mild flavor, but it took 2 months to mature. We had no problems with beer clarifying, and with our mild spices used, it turned out to be very good and even better than commercial pumpkin beers. So there you go. Thanks, Don. I love hearing about different approaches to the same situation, even when I'm proven wrong. I appreciate that. I replied to one of these guys that I'm often glad to be proven wrong, especially when it's as far as homebrew advice goes. Listeners to the archives will recall a couple episodes with Mike Tonsmeyer and Nathan Zender talking about Solera brewing. Essentially, Solera brewing is based on the concept of aging a beer, usually in a barrel. And over time, some of the beer is removed from the barrel or barrels, because sometimes they rack from barrel to barrel, and fresh beer is used to replace that beer in the barrel. That's the basic concept of Solera, if you haven't heard of it before. There are variations on that theme, but that is in its simplest form. Ethan Tripp started the project that yielded the beers that we're going to be tasting today more than 3 years ago, if I do my math right. What he does is every 6 months, he bottles a third of the volume of his whiskey barrel and adds fresh beer of the same recipe back. And he sent us the results of the first 2.5 years of this process, as I figure it, because it's five bottles. Confused? I hope you won't be after listening to this. Ethan Tripp, welcome to Basic Brewing Radio.
Thanks. Glad to be on.
Also, welcome to the studio from thehomebrewery.com, Mr. Andy Sparks.
Great to be here.
We are all fans of the sour beers, and we have 5 bottles sitting in front of us, Andy.
Yeah, you've been telling me about this night for a while, and I'm pretty excited about it. This is a pretty impressive lineup.
It's the labels that are impressive, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this is what 2.5 years of work that we're looking at here, Ethan?
Yeah, something like that. Going on or maybe past 3 at this point. Once it's all included. But yeah, quite a stretch.
So maybe while we're opening and pouring the first one, maybe you should give us some background on what exactly we have here.
Sure. So a few years ago, I'd been getting into the sours for a while, and some friends and I were talking about how expensive they were at the time, and the prices kind of always going up, and how we all kind of wanted to try brewing them at home, and in partially to offset that, and also to experiment with this style that we all really were getting into. And so I had been chatting with a friend of mine about it, and he tipped me to the fact that Tuttletown Distilleries actually sells these 15-gallon whiskey casks directly from their site. And once I saw that, and the idea of actually using a barrel became imaginable, I sort of set off the plan to go for it. And it was, it's a little odd because it is a bourbon barrel, and that's not exactly classic for most sours, but I kind of dug the idea of going in a little bit of a different direction with it. And the bourbon to me said Oud Bruin. So I picked a recipe and went with it. So it started off by filling the thing completely, and as it's using the Solera method, the method has been from the inception to brew a new batch of beer, and then at the 6-month interval, rack out a third, 5 gallons, and rack in to fill back up and to account for angel share. So all the beers you have in front of you are all 6-month intervals roughly, and they're all the same base recipe.
And we've opened the one that says SB1. I'm assuming that means sour barrel 1.
Well, sour barrel, but
okay,
yeah.
Okay.
Solera Brew.
Solera Brew.
I'm actually drinking one of those as well. I don't have all of them, but I have 2 here that I've selected. I selected 1 and 4, so I'll be with you for those.
Well, I appreciate your sharing these. I assume some of them are more precious than others, as far as the numbers go.
Yeah, it's been really hard to hold on to the old ones. I've been meaning to, and I'll probably towards the end of this year get a chance to do the full flight of them. But I wanted some people who were just around at the inception of the project. I had told everyone, hey, if I get to 5, we'll do a vertical. And so I'm going to keep my promise.
Well, we're honored to be in that select number. We're tasting. What do you think, Andy?
Very impressive. As soon as I opened the bottle and started to decant it into the first cup, I could smell it, and it really appealed to me right off the bat. It's got that classic tart, kind of almost cherries and stuff in the nose. It's very beautiful.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, this is. It is very tasty. You can definitely smell the presence of the wood. To me, it's not overbearing, but it's definitely present. And the sourness is. I've been smelling it more than I've been tasting it, but the sourness. Oh, it's nice, but it's not overpowering. It's not overbearing. To me, Lawfully is the standard because it was my first, sour beer. To me, it's not as sour as a Lawfully. What do you think, Andy?
I would say that's probably true. I've had several different years of Lawfully, and it does change a little bit from year to year, but I wouldn't say this is near as tart as that.
Mm-hmm.
That stuff can kind of leave me with a bit of that sour face
and sour stomach sometimes.
Yeah.
But Ethan, how has this changed over time?
Do you mean this example throughout the years, or
yeah? This number 1, has it mellowed over time?
It's really interesting. I'm picking up. It's probably been 2 years since I've had one of these, so I'm picking up a lot of age, getting some of the oxidation, mostly in scent, but also a bit there in the middle. It used to be a bit sweeter. It's definitely dried out, and the presence of the whiskey has definitely taken a notch down. I mean, when I opened the first bottle of this, I just remember, what poured out of the glass scent-wise was just whiskey, and it was a little mellower in the glass, thankfully, but it was definitely a whiskey-forward beer.
Yeah, that was when I heard about this project and knew that we were going to be tasting, a beer that had some age on it. It's too bad that you can't just kind of freeze beers in time. You know what I'm saying? Because
absolutely, I've thought about it. Yeah.
Because I guess you could do tasting notes and try to get as accurate as you can, but we can't really compare how the oak presence was in the very beginning, against what comes out now out of the barrel. But it's it's delicious, this beer right now.
Yeah, it's drinking great.
But why don't we crack open the second one while you tell us about the recipe? Talk to us about the recipe, and I'm assuming it's the same recipe every time that you use to top it back up.
The original notes that I have are scaled for a 15-gallon batch, so they're going to read a little strange, but this is 25 pounds German Pils, 6 Vienna, 6 Karamunic 3, 6 ounces of British roast barley, 6 ounces of chocolate malt, and then the hops are Hallertau 6 ounces at 60 and Saaz 3 ounces at 60. And this is fermented before putting into the barrel. I didn't want to deal with barrel fermentation or barrel primary fermentation for a couple reasons. So this is done just with what I think is a nice clean ale yeast, SAF Ale 05, just to get the heavy lifting done. and then into the barrel for the long rest.
Yeah, I'm assuming part of the reason is you didn't want a large amount of trub in the bottom of your barrel for several years.
Absolutely. And I was wary when I was doing some research for the project, just about discussions of autolysis and things like that. I wanted to make sure that I was as clear of that as possible. So I've always been really careful about getting any trub into the barrel because it's not really going to come out. And that was definitely part of why I went with a clean primary.
Yeah, Andy's got a barrel at home, and he's wanting to play with some bugs, some souring bugs, and do a project, kind of similar to this. So, Andy, you may want to. I'm sure you've got some questions of your own.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking forward to hearing what bugs are in here, right? How do you get this thing started and primed up with the critters that we got going here?
So, one of the things that I've been doing since I started this project that started for this one is really doing a lot of heavy sour bug harvesting from commercial beers. So the group of fellows that I spoke about earlier who, I'd made this sort of promise to are all, old time friends of mine. We've kind of gotten more and more heavily into beers together, especially the sours. And some of them are homebrewers too. And so we often, once or twice a year, we'll make a trek out to one of the guys' cabins, do some work, logging and stuff up there around their property, and do a fair amount of drinking really nice beers. And during those sessions, someone always has what we call the bug jar. And bug jar is just a ball jar with some simple, DME wort in it, and anything that is a good candidate for having viable cultures gets pitched in. We usually keep a log of what goes in there, and then someone goes home with it and makes a beer out of it. So this one actually has a full weekend's worth of bugs in it, and that's over 30 beers.
Wow.
I did not keep the notes, unfortunately, for all of those bugs. But the heavy lifter, because I didn't want to rely solely on these harvested critters, was to go with one of the bug farms. So I went with just check to make sure I'm giving you accurate information here. I went with the Bug Farm 4. And so that and the bug jar were both put into about a 2-liter starter. And that sat for probably about a week before getting pitched in after the beer.
Huh. After that week, what did it look like? Was there a big thick pellicle on it? Was it just looked like a normal starter?
It did look very much like a normal starter. I think it was showing a little, if I remember correctly, it's been a long time. It was showing a somewhat less signs of viability than I would have liked. Yeah, at the time, you're trying to coordinate all this stuff. I'd been hoping that it would be kicking a little stronger, and it just was just kind of starting to go. Now, since then, I've done a lot of work with harvested bugs, with yeast catching, and worked with all kinds of different cultures. And I know that some of them just will not show the big, heavy krausen like you're used to seeing with a clean ale yeast. Some of them barely produce any surface goings on at all. Now, if it's a lighter beer and you can see it, you'll see stuff churning around inside, and so you'll know you have fermentation. You'll see airlock action and stuff like that, but it doesn't always do your typical blow-off that you would normally see.
Now, number two, we've been sampling number two, and what are your thoughts about the second one, Andy?
Well, I like it. I think it's a little more tart than the first one. It looks like it's getting more sour as it moves along, which I guess you would expect.
Mm-hmm. And it looks like it might be a half a shade darker than the first one. The first one almost has kind of a red tinge to it, but the second one is a little darker. The first one, I get more of the kind of cherry smell, and then the second one is I think I may be getting a little more of the wood character just in the nose. It is a different. It's slightly more sour. It's still enjoyable, but it's interesting. It's a different character.
Yeah, I mean, with this Solera method, so the first one you guys had would have been an unblended beer.
Mm-hmm.
So that's it as straight up as we can get it. Now, by the second one, you have, I guess 75%, or I'm not going to do math. You have a large percent of the original beer, and now you have this fresh beer incorporated as well. More time, obviously, for the first beer in the wood, extracting various things. Taking a beer out at 6 months is a relatively short time for souring. So, it certainly had time to do some finishing work in the bottle, but I think it's still overall going to have a bit younger and less sour of a flavor. And I think we're going to be seeing some through successive bottles, ratcheting up of complexity, especially with overlaying sour notes, and I think the cherry kind of comes and goes depending on how oaky and grippy each vintage is, and that has varied some.
But you didn't add any more bugs, right? You just took beer and then replaced it with fresh beer.
Exactly. So my general method has been to brew a 10-gallon batch of replacement beer, because year to year, I have no way of knowing how much is evaporated. And, I guess I could, try fashioning some kind of like level testing gauge for the barrel. But I found it easier to just brew more beer. It gets filled up, and then whatever, 3 or 4 gallons I have left over just goes on draft or something. It's turned into another beer. And so that just gets the same day the old beer gets racked out and bottled, and the new beer gets racked in, and we seal it up and wait again.
Now, do you visit it from time to time and top up to account for the angel share or for evaporation over time?
No, and actually, that was one of the things that I was concerned about when I first started the project, and I didn't know. It's very difficult to tell these things what the actual impact was going to be over time. And so the first year I was worried about it, and I think the second year I just said to myself, you know what, let's just let it go and see what happens. And if I'm starting to pick up something I don't like, I can always switch back to topping off. But I found that by leaving it open, by allowing there to be a bit more oxygen transfer, I picked up the kind of sourness I was looking for. I mean, I intentionally left it to go to try to acquire more of, especially an acetic note, which I do really like in new brooms. You obviously don't want it to dominate, but that was definitely part of the reason. Generally people say if you don't want to get acetic, you better get it topped up. So I sort of the opposite.
So, do you use an airlock or do you use one of those one-way stoppers?
So, I need to actually get one of those one-way stoppers. One thing that no one told me when I started out this barrel project is that they sort of breathe. And so what I mean by that is throughout the year, you have a sort of expansion and contraction that goes on, and definitely when it starts to the temperature starts to drop, or I might be screwing this up. Sorry. As the temperature fluctuates, you will get suction coming from inside the barrel, and if you have an airlock in there, it's going to suck whatever in the airlock in. Even if it's a blow-off tube, it's going to start sucking stuff out. And I think I had one time of having the airlock on there and coming back like an hour later, and the level was lower, and realizing that something's weird. So put a blow-off on and just watched the sanitizer in the blow-off tube start going up.
Yeah, Andy and I chuckled because he had a similar experience.
Yeah, yes, I know this all too well. I actually put a carboy in a fridge and tried to crash the yeast out of it and put it, and this was back when I was a young brewer and didn't know better, and put a blow-off tube into a jar of sanitizer and came back and that jar was empty. And, and you just don't know. The truth is the little S-locks will kind of run backwards. If they're really full, they will suck a little bit of that stuff back in. But if you keep them, at the right fill level or lower, they'll run backwards a little bit. And they're good for if you're going to do that. You're going to crash your beer or something like that.
Boy, number three is a different beer again.
Yeah, I really like this one.
Yeah, this one has a little bit. It's got the sourness on the nose, but it's also picked up a little bit of funk.
I think this one's got some Brett in it. I guess they all had bread in it, but now it seems to be coming out more.
Yeah, this is more, the aroma is more complex, whereas the previous one was kind of more on the sort of, maybe not acetic, but, the sour side. This one is, it's got that sourness, but then it's also got this kind of dark character as well to the aroma. And then how's it taste, Andy?
Well, it tastes delicious, like a candy, sour candy.
Oh yeah, that's good. It's tasty. You said candy. When I was drinking it the first time, I thought brown sugar.
Yeah.
And I don't. It's kind of weird when you're drinking a sour beer to think of something so sweet as brown sugar, but to me, it's in there. Yeah. Do you get brown sugar in there at all?
I definitely get those kind of caramelized notes and stuff. This beer is really getting good.
Yeah.
Yeah, it took a while for the funk. I'm glad you mentioned was another thing that I kind of wondered when I first started when it was going to pick up, because the first couple ones definitely sour, not really funky. And that was something that I definitely wanted to have a bit of, and I think that's I've made a lot of short sour beers, and you can make a pretty sour beer in a pretty short amount of time, but funk just takes time to develop.
Well, you've got the funk. If anybody asks who's got the funk, number 3's got the funk.
I think it is a little interesting though that the first two technically had Brett in them, right? But they didn't even develop it in the bottle, which is sometimes done. Sometimes we do that at the bottling stage, just inject it there. So I'm surprised it didn't kind of come forward. Maybe that was part of why it's changed flavor a little bit. But this one was just delicious.
Thanks. The behavior of the microbes throughout the life of this beer has been really interesting. All the things you're mentioning are things that I've wondered about, and I wish I honestly knew more about why the flavors develop the way that they do, but it's just a very mysterious process. And I've done, a couple Soleras now, different ones, and they're, each one seems like a new animal. They develop different attributes, and I don't know if you could chalk that up to terroir, or who knows, because the other ones in other locations. Maybe it has to do with how hot or cold where they are, how much that temperature swing is. I mean, you could list a whole bunch of things that could be involved. I just don't. I don't know. It's a very interesting process.
I went back and I took a sip out of number 2 and number 1, and those are opening up as well. And there's different kind of darker notes coming out of those too. Which is a good, if you do a vertical tasting like this, it's a good thing to remember not to drink all of the first samples, because you're going to want to come back.
Yeah, I'm glad you reminded me, because I was getting low on this number 1 here. I wanted to get back to the airlock thing, just so we cover that. So what I was saying earlier was, I realized that this suckback thing was a problem. So now my mode is to do, when the beer goes in, it gets the blow-off tube, because it does go nuts. Once it's all blown off and everything like that, I don't top up. What I do is actually I put in a silicone stopper, not one of the solid ones, one of the molded ones, with actually a small cut piece of toasted oak dowel shoved through it, and I just stick that in.
So it gets to breathe.
Yeah. I mean, the barrel breathes anyway, but I felt like that opening there, it made sense. And so far, it hasn't really responded to the outward part of the contraction. Like, it hasn't blown off or anything. So, knock on wood, but I think it's pretty much good to go. I never did go. I actually have a hard bung for that barrel, and I never used it. I think I was always a little weird about something that was coming into and out of the contact with the beer that I couldn't really effectively sanitize. And I mean, these are sour beers, and we have a strong microbial population going on, but it doesn't mean that, or at least I don't think it means that it's beyond care. I certainly didn't want to mess with my investment, so the hard bung is sitting lonely somewhere in my basement.
Nothing like a lonely bung. Number 4 is again, it's a different, it's another animal, and I don't know if I'm getting palate fatigue at this point, but it seems like to me that the sourness is a little less than number 3. Is that, or is it just, or is it just my tongue being stripped?
Well, I noticed that this one is not as well carbonated as some of the other ones. This one is actually almost flat, and
Maybe
without that bit of carbonic acid to kind of tickle your tongue, you might be perceiving that it's not quite as sour as the last one, because it still has plenty of pucker power as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, but it's I don't know. To me, it's maybe it is the lack of or lesser carbonation, but it's just not as complex as number 3. It's still good. I'm still enjoying it.
It's interesting. I just opened that as well, so it's the first transition I've made, and it is night and day. I mean, it's so far from one, just in that initial flavor. Picking up the dark things you guys were talking about earlier, and the funk. Something about this, I did get a rush of oak and whiskey again.
Number 1, I just took another sip of number 1, and I got muscadine. It is a brighter beer than number 4. Because muscadine is the kind of wild grape, for those who aren't familiar. So it's kind of like that muscadine skin kind of a thing going on.
Yeah. And number 4, I feel like you're getting to the point where you're starting to get the tannic oak grippiness kind of thing really going on. I mean, it's a beer that seems to claw at the tongue almost. It's a definitely a sharp, woody, very dark, robust kind of flavor.
Is there, I mean, do you anticipate, or have you done some research in other similar projects? Do you anticipate a time where the barrel and the project has served its purpose, or gone through its usefulness, so to speak? Is there like a bell curve of where after a while the beers start to not taste better every year?
I've definitely thought a lot about it. I mean, I think my approach to making sour beers in general has been more of a lifestyle choice than a thing I do occasionally.
You're committed.
So, I mean, I brew far and away more sour beer than anything else. And, my fridge here has vials of various cultures that have grown up, and I'm part of a few now multi-year barrel projects, all of them Soleras actually, because me and the guys I brew with, were just so happy with the method. But, I think that the discussion came up amongst us with 5. Is it too much yet? Because that's is a dark, deeply sour beer, and it's there's certainly a place for such things, but I don't know if I can imagine, especially a beer as dark as this, getting sourer than that and not losing something. So my plan is essentially, I look at this like buying a cow. You make an investment, and hopefully it just keeps giving to you for a while, and I intend to milk it as long as I can, but since I want it to always be something that I look forward to doing, something that's continuing to make better and better beer. I may, we'll see how 6 comes out, but I may either add a barrel, which is always an option, or change the blending ratio. And that's one of the great things with Solera is, if you read about the practices of sherry or Madeira makers, they don't keep their barrel ratios. I mean, they're always messing around with how much is left in any one barrel and how much is added to the overall blend. And so I'm not in any way above nearly emptying the barrel. If that's what it takes, if I leave only a couple liters of this to add like that aged, deep flavor to what it will essentially be a new beer to rejuvenate the whole process, then that's what I do. I mean, I've even thought about draining the whole thing, setting aside a gallon or two, steam cleaning the hell out of it, and then putting it back in for another go.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, if it gets to a point where it's just too potent, you rack off most of it and put fresh beer in and see if it ratchets it back.
But especially with a clean, you're talking about you're not going to kill the microbes. There's still going to be something in there, but it's not going to be the kind of population that you're going to have in the slurry that's probably living at the bottom of this barrel.
Boy, we're sipping on number 5 now. How old is this? How long has number 5 been in the barrel or in the bottle?
Number 5. Let me just check my notes real quick.
While you're checking your notes, I'm just going to say number 5 is my favorite.
Number 5 is very good. I really like number 3. I liked it when that funk came on. This has got a kind of a fresh kind of drinkability to it,
Yeah, the carbonation level is a little higher. It's actually retaining the head longer. The mouthfeel is it's a more significant mouthfeel.
Exactly.
It's a more drinkable beer. There's that sourness and the woodiness that's in there, but it's in a form that is more sort of palatable.
Yeah,
I think
softer maybe.
Yeah,
I really like this one. Yeah,
That's great. I mean, I do have to say, that being the newest one, I've been, enjoying it more liberally because, I'm not as concerned about running out of bottles as the older ones, and I have really been enjoying that beer. But the question still remains, like it's good now, but I feel like that one's still it's edging to a level of intensity that while this vintage is good, the next one could be too far. It's hard to say. I mean, I'm definitely more inclined to let one of them go just to a completely oppressive level before deciding to ratchet back.
Well, I'm sure
because I do like my sour beer, and I can have a serious palate destroyer every once in a while.
Well, I'm sure Mike Tonsmeyer and Nathan Zender would gladly take the bottles off your hands, and as we would too.
I would encourage you to just continue this. I would say indefinitely. I mean, if you want to try something, I would maybe get a different barrel. This is an awful cool project, and I don't think it'll get worse. I think it's going to get better and better and better. This last beer is terrific. So, yeah, I'd keep going.
So did you find your notes? How long has this number 5 been in the bottle?
So that's been almost exactly 6 months now.
Oh, so it's time.
It is. October is the time. October and April, pretty much, are the months. I've actually been thinking, man, I need to do that. It usually starts with like pangs of panic, like, oh crap, am I like 2 months behind on the sour brown? But I've never missed an interval yet. Knock on wood.
So to speak.
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
I could run downstairs and knock on the barrel.
I mean, to some degree, for the folks that are thinking about doing this, since you ferment the beer pretty much completely and then put it in the barrel, you can get that beer staged up and ready to go in a month, 2 months even before, and get it ready in a nice carboy and have it sitting there ready to go when you want to do the barrel project and switch out that 5 gallons.
And it's one of the things that's great about this project too, is that, I've thought a lot about doing this, especially since my projects have just gotten bigger and bigger since. It's even if you don't want to go all the way out and buy, this barrel was 214 shipped from Tuttletown, which I think is a great deal for the quality of the barrel and what's inside. I mean, they make fantastic whiskey, and just smelling that barrel nearly got me drunk when I was working with it. You could do this with a handful of oak cubes in a bucket if you wanted to. I think that what's really great about it is having this thing that you're constantly returning to, and you're kind of watching it grow and tasting all the different stages of development, and thinking, getting to really think and focus about your brewing and your care of that beer. And the actual maintenance once you're started is really so little. I mean, to brew once a year to keep this thing going, at this point, to me, I feel like I'm cheating. Like, it's so easy to just let this thing keep rolling on. And I mean, I do nothing. I put it in the barrel. I keep reasonable care of it. And every 6 months, I get, 2.5 cases or so of this.
It's your cow.
It's my cow.
And it's utterly delicious.
Oh, man.
I'm so sorry. Well, I got to tell you, I've been going back through the archives here, and sipping each one, and each one has its own character and its own delightful layers. And sure, I have favorites between, I think number 5 is just my favorite just because of the drinkability, along with the, you get the impact of the sourness and the character of the wood, but you also get kind of a malty mouthfeel with it too. But man, they're all just tasty. They're all just, if you were just to give me a single bottle by itself of any of these, I'd be just real happy.
It'd be a real treat.
Yeah.
Yeah. The only way we know that there's one better than the other is because we get to try them all in a row.
Yeah. Yeah. So, wow. Anything else now that Ethan's on the line here, Andy? What else?
Yeah. I don't know. What are some of your favorite, some of the favorite, beers that you get, commercial brands that went into the that kind of the bottle that you collected up?
Good question.
Well, I would have to say, for anyone who's out there, and you guys have heard this before, harvesting dregs, Jolly Pumpkin, Jolly Pumpkin, Jolly Pumpkin.
Yeah, I love their beers.
One, their beers are fantastic, and two, that yeast is viable, and it will take over everything. It is absolutely voracious, and we've actually started to exclude it from some of our blends because it's so dominant. So now I have bottles in the fridge labeled Cabin Blend Non-JP. And sometimes we'll have 2 starters out there and people will be like, which one goes where? I'm like, is that JP? No, keep it out of that jar. Put it in the other one. It's a fantastic starter for anyone who wants to get their first culture going. I can't recommend it highly enough. Also, obviously, aside from commercial beers, this project owes a huge debt to East Coast Yeast for really kicking things off in the right direction with really healthy, viable cultures that are going to do well over time. But as far as the other beers are concerned, definitely Cantillon, very likely Driefontein. You could pretty much go through and name the names. There's Russian River in there for sure.
James, I was thinking maybe we ought to go downstairs and get a mason jar and sanitize it.
Well, actually, yeah, I think you got your beer right here, Andy. Yeah, I could. We've got 5 bottles right here. I could just give you a stopper, and or we could cap one, and you could take it home and just dump it into your barrel right now.
There you go.
Definitely some Alvin as well. Probably Petrus. Like I said, name names. They're right. Probably in there. There was 30 plus beers in that jar. If it's a good sour, we appreciate it, and someone probably brought a bottle.
Yeah, I feel like we're not worthy, and but I certainly appreciate your sending the beers, and keep us updated.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Thanks, Ethan.
Thank you.
Man, what a fun evening. Andy and I had enough left in the bottles to stopper some of them for use in the future. And I was generous. I sent Andy home with the leftovers from bottle number 5. So that I hope that he can use that in his little whiskey barrel at home to make some tasty sour beers. Thanks very, very much to Ethan for sharing the wonderful beers that we tasted. And really cool to see how the beers changed over time. And I hope that the barrel continues to provide tasty batches on into the future. If you have brewing questions, show suggestions, or just want to say howdy, write to james@basicbrewing.com, or just fill out the contact form on basicbrewing.com. And please don't forget to tell us where you're from. Our Basic Brewing growler bags are available in our shop. Protect your precious homebrew and craft beers. You take it from place to place. Check out our support link where you can throw a couple of bucks into the tip jar by subscribing financially to our podcasts. And be sure to check out our DVDs, as usual, Extract Brewing and Partial Mashing, Stepping into All-Grain, Low-Tech Lagering and Decoction Mashing, and Introduction to Wine Kits. You can find them all on our site. We've got combo deals to save you a few bucks if you want to buy more than one DVD at a time, and you can check out our Basic Brewing shirts in the store, too. Our Brewers Logbooks are in the store, too. Keep track of up to 50 batches of beer. And you can see a listing of the fine folks across the country who sell our DVDs on basicbrewing.com. And if there isn't a vendor in your area, you can order them online in our online shop at basicbrewingshop.com. Thanks to everybody who's continued to click on our Amazon.com link. We appreciate the support there. Our featured products this week that were purchased through the link are Food and Wine, 20 Best Burger Recipes, and Louisville Slugger Hard Maple Baseball Bat, black, 32-inch. Thanks again, everybody. And remember, I can't tell who bought what, so no worries there. Just click on the Amazon.com logo on our site the next time you feel like Amazon shopping. We greatly appreciate your support. Don't forget you can also join the American Homebrewers Association and subscribe to Brew Your Own magazine through the associate links on basicbrewing.com. That's all until next time. Until then, thanks for listening, everybody. I'm James Spencer. Production help for Basic Brewing Radio and our website is provided by Kelly Dutson. Basic Brewing Radio is a production of Active Voicing. We'll talk to you next time, everybody. So long.